Let's move on to a very exciting topic in this webinar. This topic is exports. It's not secret that many Canadian companies are eager to expand their presence in Mexico by exporting their products and services. But how can they achieve this successfully? To shed some light on this important topic, we are thrilled to have an expert in the field with us today. He's leading the operation in Mexico of one institution that is crucial for Canadian exporters. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next guest speaker, Mr. Jorge Rave, who brings a wealth of experience and expertise in international affairs to our webinar. He was appointed as the Chief Representative of Export Development Canada for Mexico in 2018, and since then, he has been leading the operations that are crucial for Canadian exporters in this country. With over 20 years of professional experience in both public and private sector organizations, Jorge has consistently taken on position of increasing scope and responsibility with a special focus on Latin America. His professional background also includes conducting academic research and participating in humanitarian and economic development projects in Latin America, Europe, and Canada. Jorge is a regular speaker at international finance and trade conference and a frequent author of articles on international trade. I will highly recommend that you look for his thoughtful trade analysis on the internet. Jorge holds a degree from Universidad Pontificia Bolivariana in Colombia. He also has a master's degree in international relations from the University du Quebec in Montreal and a postgraduate diploma in strategy and innovation from Oxford University. Having immigrated to Canada in the early 2000s and lived in 5 different countries, Jorge is passionate about inclusion, diversity, and equity issues and volunteers as a mentor with different organizations. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest, Jorge Rave, Chief Representative of Export Development Canada in Mexico. Over to you, Jorge. Welcome.
Hello, Juan. How are you? How you doing? It's a pleasure to be here, and finally, it's nice to meet a friend face to face, although on a virtual type of environment. So thank you very much for hosting us. I want to be brief in my remarks. We share. And we're going to be sharing a very quick presentation that our team prepared for today. So please let me know when you're able to see my screen with the presentation in the deck.
Yes, thank you. We can see it now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Joseph, you want, okay, please, sorry, to put in presentation mode, please.
Sure, absolutely. It is right there. Okay. So as I was saying, before beginning, I realized, and I really like what you were saying about me being an expert. I'm far from being an expert, but clearly our role as a Canadian government organization is to ensure that we are able to provide Canadian exporters and investors with the expertise that they require. I have been very fortunate to be leading EDC's operations in Mexico, as you mentioned, for a few years already. So thanks again for the trust. Thanks again for having us here, and thanks to my EDC colleagues in Vancouver for opening this opportunity for us. So I'm going to start by saying something that perhaps you have heard from others before, and that is the fact that over the past couple of years, our team in Mexico has seen a very interesting diversification story coming out of this of this market, especially in the relationship with Canada, and that is related mostly to advanced manufacturing, but we're now also including other sectors. So from an EDC point of view, I'm happy to share that we are already participating in this diversification story. We're very proud of the fact that EDC's brand and relevance in obviously in the province of British Columbia and in other parts of Canada has grown significantly, and that we have embarked in a very significant transformation for the past few years. I always joke with colleagues and friends that my mandate as EDC representative in Mexico was one when I boarded the plane in Ottawa in August of 2018, and another one where I finally landed just a few hours later. So it's a very interesting story, and essentially because as an international rep of BDC, I get to see and experience the drive, the passion, the love for Canada that a lot of you entrepreneurs are putting into making this relationship fantastic and great. But also because now I'm getting to see the innovation that Canada has to offer to not only Mexico but other parts of the world. So I'm just going to start by sharing a few just a few slides on what it is that we are looking to do. So give me a second here. I just want to. EDC is the Canadian export credit agency of or the official export credit agency of Canada. We are a self-sustaining organization, and the fact that we are self-sustaining, rated AAA, allow us to give back to the Canadian people, not only in taxpayers, not only through our services, but also through our annual dividend, which in 2021 reached $580 million. That's $580 million, and that's quite remarkable for Canada and for the trade connections that we are doing. For over 75 years, we've helped Canadian companies navigate, manage, and take on risk, which has enabled them to grow and succeed in global markets. And our mission is to use our unique trade knowledge and financial solutions to develop trade between Canada and other countries, of course, but also to enhance the Canadian competitiveness in the international marketplace. So our ecosystem, if I were to put it in those terms, is comprises a very close collaboration with the Trade Commissioner Service, with Business Development of Canada, BDC, Canadian Commercial Corporation, CCC, and obviously the provincial representation offices around the world. So that's something that we are very proud of, the fact that we are part of the Team Canada. We have 22 offices.
Sorry,
yes, go
Jorge,
ahead.
would you mind put your presentation on a slideshow mode, please? Because we are seeing the slides on the side.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, no worries. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's not what I was saying, but thank you for letting me know.
Thank you.
Can you see it now in presentation mode?
Not yet.
Okay.
It's not working.
Yeah, it is not. It's not working. Let me see if it. My colleague Marilu Cisneros is going to help me there, so I'm going to stop sharing, and Marilu will share with you her screen. And that thanks for Juan.
No, thank you.
This is another one of the competencies that we have now developed as a result of COVID. We tend to be more multitasking now.
Exactly. Yes, thank you.
So I was saying, and thanks, Marilu, for sharing your screen. Marilu is our regional manager based out of Mexico, of course, and it's a great resource for those companies that are interested in Mexico as well. We can go to the next slide, Marilu. So EDC has 22 offices throughout Canada and 19 offices in around the world. So that's our global presence. So we are truly a global Canadian organization. Very lean in the way we operate. We don't have. I think we only have around 1,700 employees worldwide. In Mexico, we have 2 offices. One in Mexico City that opened in the year 2000, and another one in Monterrey that opened in the year 2002. So one of the very interesting trends that we are seeing is that in the past few years, our offices in Mexico have been taking triple the number of calls from Canadian companies, both exporters and investors, compared to just a few years ago. We can go to the next slide. So EDC helps Canadian companies of all sectors and industries, of traditional exports, of course, service-based exports, and companies that are selling into global supply chains. And regardless of their knowledge and expertise with international trade, we are there to help those companies. So Those companies usually approach us because they want to grow their brand in global markets, and also some of the non-exporting companies want to be able to start exporting and even increasing their sales in Canada. We have obviously an international mandate, and that's something that has to be very, very clear. So this is a slide that I really like, because as a financial institution, we are very drawn to numbers, of course, and this is quite explicit about our results for the year 2021. Our results for 2022 have not come out yet, but this is one that I find quite revealing and quite significant for EDC, and quite remarkable as well. So I'll draw your attention to the upper left corner, where we highlight the number of jobs that were supported because of our participation in international trade in Canada. So that's something that we're very proud of. In a country of 37 million people, 500,000 jobs. It's quite remarkable, and we are very proud of that. Business conducted by our customers with the help of EDC Solutions were $111 billion, which is the number that you see to your right. And we have supported business opportunities in 215 markets in that year 2021. At EDC, we define markets not as countries, but even could be regions within one country, and that's why the markets that you see there are more than the total number of countries that are registered at the UN, for example. So is not a typo. It's actually that in many cases that's how we are approaching things. So the next number that I like is the one at the center of the slide. 21,981 of our financial and non-financial customers that are small and medium-sized enterprises, so SMEs, which that helps us demystify the fact that a lot of people assume that EDC is only there for the big guys. That's not the case. And also the one just down below, $1.7 billion in support for women-owned and women-led businesses, and of course $260 million for Indigenous businesses in Canada. So again, a lot of very proud numbers that we also want to share with you. We also provided in 2021, and that trend continued in 2022, more than $250 million for Canadian direct investment abroad. So investors, Canadian investors that are not only coming to Mexico, but other parts of the world. And that's obviously important because of our reliance on trade, the reliance of the Canadian economy on trade. We have a very small domestic market, and then it's imperative that Canadian companies think globally to try and compete and grow. We can go to the next slide, Marilu. So here are our services. I'm just going to go through this very quickly. We provide risk mitigation solutions, financing, insurance, and those are part of that's our core. But over the past few years, I would say over the past 10 years, more or less, knowledge and connections have become extremely important for our clients. Enrique mentioned before, and I want to take the opportunity also to thank Enrique for highlighting the collaboration that CanChem and EDC have been able to maintain and grow over the past few years. But knowledge and connections are quite important. So we are receiving more calls from Canadian companies that are interested in the Mexican market. They want to know how it is to do business here. And we have also incorporated solutions as cultural guides on how to do business in Mexico that are available, of course, on our EDC website, edc.ca. Website, and connections, of course, which is part of what we are here to do. When we are any of my colleagues that have the same level of responsibility that I do, we're going to establish connections and leverage our ability to interact with a lot of international companies that are the best companies that our Canadian companies can be working with. So. That's an interesting facet, of course, of what we do. So let me now. Sorry, we can just go to the next one, Marilu. So let me now talk to Canada's trade with Mexico. So Mexico, of course, is a key trading and diplomatic partner for Canada. That is no secret. It's part of North America, of course, and the Canadian economy has been intimately connected to Mexico's economy especially since the inception of NAFTA in 1994. So we see tremendous opportunity with the agreement that was the trade agreement that was renegotiated and was renamed CUSMA, CUSMA, or Canada, United States, Mexico Agreement. Mexicans, of course, will talk about TMEC, and Americans will call USMCA, but we call it CUSMA in the Canadian context. Mexico, the 15th largest economy in the world and the 10th most populated country with 130 million people. And from a Mexican perspective, according to these are numbers from the Mexican Ministry of Economy, Canada is their 8th trading partner and the 3rd foreign investor in Mexico. That's quite significant, and it should tell you that there's a lot of opportunity that we have that we find obviously in this market, and that's one of the reasons why we are sitting here today around the table. Mexico has, of course, 15 free trade agreements that offer preferential trade access to 50 countries. Canada is actually catching up on that, and Canada has our colleagues from the Trade Commissioner Service and Global Affairs have done a tremendous job over the past few years, negotiating a number of free trade agreements also for Canada. So 2021, the total exports of Canadian goods to Mexico were 10.3 billion Canadian dollars, and according to StatsCan, Mexico was the 5th destination of Canadian exports to the world. So our main exports, as you see in the list that we have there in the pie chart, are vehicles, mechanical or electric machinery, agri-food products, and minerals. So that's quite an interesting facet there of what we have. I think we can go to the next slide, Marilu. This is one slide that I really like, and that highlights the export potential of Canadian goods and services to Canada. As I mentioned, the story now for EDC is about economic diversification, and we're also trying with the spirit of always trying to build a more resilient and stable economy in Canada. So future economic growth, the way our economists see it, and our chief economist who just released a very interesting video yesterday highlighting the fact that diversification is the way to go for Canada. It's going to be export trade dependent, and we see great opportunity to expand the number of customers served from an EDC point of view to better support that diversification story. So in this chart, what we're doing, or what we did, is we tried to match Canada's current exports with Mexico's current imports, and that leads to a quick snapshot that you see there of the products that have the most export potential to Mexico. So the darker sides of if you take any of the squares, the darker sides in each of the squares represent the current exports of those products, and the lighter sides are the untapped potential that remains. So in line with this chart, advanced manufacturing for the automotive and aerospace industry can increase exports to Mexico, for example. And EDC sees Mexico as an interesting market for Canadian companies, of course, because Mexico is the 7th largest importer of industrial machinery, equipment, and parts, and obviously the 10th largest importer of electronic and electrical equipment and parts. So very interesting chart here that my team prepared for this event. Let's move to the next one, because I'd like to leave time for Q&A. So our EDC business volume in Mexico, these were some of our financial highlights in 2022. As I said, one of Canada's top 10 export destinations, growing consumer class, younger, better education labor force, proximity to the US, which is quite interesting for a lot of companies that are now thinking of not only keeping their operations in Canada, but also now coming to Mexico around a story that's related to nearshoring. And in many cases, what we are seeing anecdotally is companies that are now more and more interested in leaving Asia, coming to North America, coming back to North America after a number of years, and then expanding on opportunities there, for example. So what has happened in the North American trade relationship, that since the beginning of NAFTA in 1994, the bilateral trade between Canada and Mexico has increased more than 9 times. And that's obviously an opportunity that we can continue to tap on. The number of companies, as I said, that are coming and knocking on our doors is increasing. Our volume in financing is quite significant. The Mexican market continues to be a priority, of course, for Canada and for EDC. It wouldn't be fair if I didn't speak to some of the challenges that we are seeing in this market. Of course, Mexico offers tremendous opportunity, as we said, but it's quite important that Canadian exporters and investors navigate the Mexican business environment with eyes wide open, and that's exactly the same type of advice that anyone would give. Even a Mexican company trying to do business in Canada or in other parts of the world. Just go make sure that you understand the market that you're going into. But in the case of Mexico, we are still seeing that security and some pockets of corruption continue to be two of the greatest challenges that Canadian investors and exporters are facing in this market. The inception of NAFTA and now the renegotiation of that agreement into CUSMA has led to noticeable improvements in the fight against corruption. That's something that I am the first one to acknowledge and to recognize. But it's, again, important that companies are very vigilant when brokering deals. And that's, again, as I said, the same advice that we would give anywhere around the world, because no jurisdiction, of course, is immune to this type of business threat. So there are some, we just published recently our Doing Business in Mexico guide. It was, we had updated that in 2020, just before COVID. And then we have taken the challenge, of course, and the pleasure of re-updating that guide. So it's available, again, free of charge on our website. And I invite companies to subscribe to my EDC, which is obviously a platform that allows them to get access to a number of significant information that we have. So as a wrap up, I would say that overall, great opportunities in Mexico for Canadian companies that are trying to expand internationally, and fantastic resources, especially from you have heard a number of, and you will be hearing from a number of important players that are part of our ecosystem. As I said before, this is our team in Mexico. We're growing, so there's going to be hopefully 2 more people that will be added to the team before the end of the year. But that's the people that we have here. I'll start with the right hand side. Felipe San Miguel is our senior regional manager and our director in Monterrey. He's responsible for the northern part of the country. Ingrid Perez, our associate regional manager in Mexico City. Marilu Cisneros, our regional manager, and of course myself. So I'm going to stop there, leave open the floor for questions, and I want to thank again Juan and the CMX team for inviting me to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. This is a very useful and informative presentation. We really appreciate, and we would like to acknowledge all your support and willingness to this initiative. Without this kind of support, we couldn't succeed. And congratulations for the great job you are doing in Mexico. So we have a question in the chat. This question is from Alejandro Rojas. He's saying, I'm currently representing 2 Canadian companies supported by EDC, and they are using the CanEx program. Alejandro say it's a really powerful tool to support our expansion into markets like Mexico. Could you please elaborate a bit more on this program for other beneficiaries?
Well, the CanEx program is. Thank you, Alejandro, first for acknowledging that and for asking your question. The CanEx is not a program that is managed directly by EDC. It's a program that is part of the Canadian federal government. So of course it's an important one and an important consideration, and I'm happy that you're being part of in the companies that you are working with are part of that program. I would say, perhaps, Alejandro, if you allow me, that in many cases that the CanEx, also the CTAs, the Canadian Technology Accelerators, I had the opportunity to meet companies participating in the CTA led by our colleagues at the Trade Commissioner Service here at the embassy this week. They were coming to participate in an event at the in the agri-food space. So that's a fantastic opportunity for those companies that are getting their feet wet, that are coming to explore internationally what could potentially the federal government do for them. I would say that as a next step, as a logical next step, we want to be able to help those Canadian companies that are part of what we call the mid-market space. So companies with revenues between $10 and $300 million, to ensure that those companies can become ideally the next champions, our next national champions in many cases. Mexico, of course, one of the greatest things about working with EDC and some of our partners is that the moment you are part of that ecosystem, then the opportunities go beyond. In the case of Mexico, they can go beyond Mexico and actually take you to different places. So those companies and that group of companies between $10 and $300 million are becoming quite relevant in our, for example, in our what we call our business connection space, where we have established relationships with some of the, I believe now we're at 28 of the largest companies worldwide. In the case of Mexico, that entails the relationship that we have with companies from the Alpha group of companies out of Monterrey. So Axtel in the ICT space, Alpec in the petrochemical space, and also Sigma Alimentos, and also Soriana, which is quite an important player in Mexico. So the companies that we want to take into that journey are those companies that are part of the mid-market space, and we hope to be able to grow more of a presence of those companies. And then, if you allow me, Juan, very quickly, yes. The reason why we are focusing on those companies is because we have seen that those are the companies that have the potential to operate under major constraints in many cases. So companies that in the event where there's a large contract, for example, that would take them to a larger type of level, those are the companies that can respond to the needs of those very sophisticated international companies. So we want to make sure that we're not putting our companies at a disadvantage. A small company, for example, that has with $2 million revenue on an annual basis, then you get a contract for $10 million. Working capital is going to be a challenge for you. EDC can obviously work with your bank and help you find the risk mitigation solutions. But we want to make sure that we are setting you up for success instead of setting you up for failure at some point.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you so much. I would like also to point out that I was reading about the Business Connection program, which it looks to me an amazing opportunity to take for potential exporters. Could you explain a little bit about this initiative?
Sure, absolutely. So Business Connection program is, as I said, it's a program that it's a program that has been in operation for over 20 years. And it's one where we are operating as an international bank, in some cases partner with international banks. In our case, of course, our most international bank is Scotiabank. In some cases, we are partnered with them in syndicated loans and clubs, for example, from a banking point of view. And the program went through a rebranding, and that program is now a very sophisticated program that allows EDC to establish relationships with a number of companies. So we are providing financing at commercial rates to international companies that, in turn, in order to be considered for the program, have to report on the Canadian procurement on an annual basis, but are also under the commitment of meeting with Canadian companies that are able to meet their needs. So we have a team of sector experts and engineers in many cases, depending on the sector, that are able to identify the needs of those companies, international companies, and then match with the Canadian capabilities that we have. So again, the Canadian companies and the benefits for Canada are the center of that program. So it's an opportunity for us to ensure that those Canadian companies are meeting with the key decision makers, which in many cases goes against the spirit of consultants and a lot of people that that may be promising heaven and earth to the Canadian exporters, and promising that they're going to put them in touch with someone who is part of a company. We want to make sure that they can go up to in some cases the key decision makers, and that includes CEOs and CFOs. So the relationships that we have here are quite strategic. And again, it's part of, as I mentioned before, Soriana, for example, in the case of Mexico, the Alpha group of companies, but also other companies around the world, like Alibaba in China, or Lidl in Europe, just to name a few of those companies that we have. Grupo Energía de Bogotá in Colombia as well. So it's quite a diversified opportunity. I believe right after I finish my presentation, I can put a link to that program. Canadian companies interested in being considered, you have to apply so that we can analyze and assess your capabilities. And the first starting point is the revenues that you have. If you are over $10 million and up to $300 million in annual revenues, then you are closer to being considered a player in that role, and that opens the opportunities, as I mentioned, not only for Mexico but also for other parts of the world as well.
Thank you, Jorge. My last question, if you allow me, please, will be: I have this question in the chat saying that what is the most popular, most demanded initiative program from EDC in Mexico that Canadian exporters are using, and if you require a minimum of sales income or of years doing business of the company?
That's a fantastic question, and thank you for asking that question, because as I mentioned before, the fact that we are concentrating in this business connection program in Canadian companies and Canadian exporters that are within a range of revenues doesn't mean that we are not looking at every other company in the Canadian spectrum. So our most popular program, I would say, is what we call accounts receivable insurance. So is one where you, as a Canadian company, if you are selling to you have a company, in your case, it's a CMX Inc. Dedicated to providing services, for example, in the water space, and you find a potential client. You don't know that client. Somebody approach you. You're unsure about whether or not it's a good opportunity. But as any good business person, you don't walk away from opportunities just because you don't like the name, for example. So in that case, you can come to us, and that's where I was encouraging people to go to our My EDC, which is part of our edc.ca website. You can get just a profile, create a profile, and then have access to information on those foreign companies, for example, if you don't know them. In the event where you see that this could be a potential opportunity, so we talk about knowledge there and market expertise. In the event where you see a good opportunity for you to a good business opportunity, then you can come to EDC and you can acquire an insurance policy, and that's what we call ARI, accounts receivable insurance, that would help you insure up to 90% of your sales to that country. So in the event where your company, Juan, will be unpaid, you ship the goods and never receive the payment, then EDC will pay you, no questions asked, to ensure that you're not losing money, that your company wouldn't go belly up, and then we will ensure to go after the other company. So that's our most popular program around the world. In other cases, if a Canadian company, and we are seeing that in instances where you have infrastructure companies, for example, or even companies that are dealing with public sector organizations, they will be asked to put bonding, for example, so that to ensure that the seriousness of their proposal can be met with a guarantee from a bank. EDC can work with your bank. Our role is not to displace your relationship bank in Canada, Desjardins, Scotiabank, HSBC, any bank in Canada that you're working with. We can work with those banks and find a solution that can help the bank be more comfortable, because we are taking the risk for that bank, and the bank is finally providing you with the solution that they expect. So I would say knowledge, just to recap, insurance, accounts receivable insurance, and also the other one, of course, is bonding. And I would say in another space, but probably more companies that are more used to doing business in specific markets, our export finance support. So that allows us to act as an ECA and provide the competitive financing for your goods and services in any jurisdiction. So we will go through our standard due diligence. We'll make sure that the funding is not going to go to a company that obviously is bankrupt. We want to make sure that we see and that we're putting you facilitating business with the best companies out there. So I will say those are the main products that we have.
Thank you so much, Jorge. We really appreciate your participation today. We appreciate your willingness to support the initiative, and we hope to continue the conversation to you. We sincerely appreciate your time and
Absolutely.
support.
Thank you
so
very much, Juan.
Bye now.
So long. Bye, guys.